Good morning and very welcome to this Euractiv virtual conference on the Farm to Fork strategy, What Role for Nutrients. Our day today is kindly sponsored by Fertilizers Europe. Also welcome to those who are following us on our YouTube live stream. And of course, you can follow along online on Twitter using the hashtag EADebates. Before we start, let me allow you a brief roundup on Euractiv. We are a pan-European publishing company, publishing content in 13 languages across 13 European capitals. And in addition, we also host about 80 policy debates, just like this one, every year. A little bit of housekeeping. Of course, you can use the hashtag on Twitter to keep the debate going, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A box that you have on your screens. Please just type in as coherently and consistently as possible what you would like our panelists to answer, and we'll try to address your questions throughout the debate. However, we will begin with opening statements, and we look forward to hearing from everyone over the next hour. So let me start by introducing from the European Commission, Pierre Bascal, who is the Director of Sustainability and Income Support in DG Agri. From the European Parliament, we have Christine Schneider, MEP, who is a member of the ENVI Committee, the Environment, and is the rapporteur on Farm to Fork. From Copa Coquega, we have Oana Nyagu, and she will be dealing with questions from her area. And finally, last but not least, we have Jakob Hansen, Director General of Fertilizers Europe. A very warm welcome to all our panelists. Let me start by asking you, Pierre, to give your opening 2 minutes on the topic.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I would like first, to thank, the organizers, for the very kind invitation. I would like to start, my introduction by recalling, the broader picture and the fact that the Farm to Fork strategy, working in tandem, with the biodiversity strategy, is part of a broader initiative called, the Green Deal, that aims at ensuring that Europe becomes a sustainable, resource-efficient, and competitive economy. And the Farm to Fork strategy and biodiversity strategies present, and it is important to underline that, present a long-term vision and set in motion a gradual and irreversible process in order to produce more, but to produce with less and to produce better. And this process will require a lot of effort from farmers, and with all these ambitious targets, that we are going to discuss, later on, this morning, targets to achieve, reduction in pesticide use, fertilizer use, antibiotics, etc. But this process will also provide them with a lot of opportunities. As regards specifically nutrients, I would like to stress that the Commission wants to address, the pollution from excessive use of nutrients, and in particular, excessive use of nitrogen and phosphorus, with the objective to reduce by 50% the nutrient losses, so that to ensure zero pollution from nitrogen and phosphorus flows, coming from fertilizer. But from the outset, I would like also to stress that it is important to underline that fertilizers provide the nutrients which are essential for crops, and which is in turn, essential for our food security. But in the use, during the process of distribution and the process of assimilation of nutrient by crops, there are some inefficiencies which are unavoidable, like in any biological processes. And this is these inefficiencies which turn into nutrient losses that pollute the environment, pollutes water, pollutes the air, and pollutes the soil. And at EU level, I have to say, we have a very efficient agricultural production system, since we estimate that around 65% of the nitrogen which is potentially available, for crops are being used, by the crops. But we know that according to empirical and theoretical studies, there's still margin, for improvement in this efficiency, and there's still margin to reduce the level of nutrient losses so that we stop pollution, and we stop problems, for human health. And at the same time, we don't reduce the level of crop production, and we don't reduce and we don't increase, the risk of, impoverishing, the soil. So this is what we want to achieve with the Farm to Fork and biodiversity strategy, really addressing the problem of nutrient losses, while at the same time, maintaining soil fertility and the level of production and productivity of agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. I'm sure I will come back to you to ask a bit more about that margin for improvement. Let us turn now to Christine. Your job as rapporteur is going to be a challenging one.
Yes, good morning. Nice welcome to everybody. As the EPP rapporteur on the Farm to Fork strategy, my priority is food safety for the European citizens and to ensure for safe and sustainable food supply chain. I'm pleased that for several decades we have been looking at full shelves in our supermarkets. It's a luxury that we also owe to agriculture policy and to our farmers. Learning from the past, we must now focus on structures to produce food sustainable so that we can continue to feed our citizens in the future. This applies to sustainable production in the fields and sustainable food processing. This also includes the consumer who needs to deal responsibility and thereby sustainable with food. The European Commission presented its idea of such a system is presented in the Farm to Fork strategy, and I'm looking forward to discuss the Farm to Fork strategy with you. In agriculture, we must ensure that the plant receives the nutrients it needs to grow, to matter, and to produce a sufficient yield. This is easy to call for, however, it is challenging to put it in practice. The nutrients must be supplied to the plant at the right time according to its need and a specific moment in the growing seasons. Ideally, no nutrients are lost in the process. This is not so easy to achieve in reality, and it corresponds to the aim of the farmers to act as economically efficient as possible. We can only achieve our sustainable goals if we enable our farmers to deliver better yield results. Therefore, we need to prepare the ground for balanced fertilization and a sustainable nutrition management. I consider precision farming will be one important response to the current challenges. We need to restructure farming practice, and we need to make sure that not only the big players will profit from these innovations. In this regard, it is of utmost importance to provide efficient funds to establish systems that all farmers, conventional and organic, will be able to benefit. Research and sufficient funding are our way forward to sustainable food security. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Anna, perhaps now you could give us your perspective, which is obviously slightly different from the political side we've heard.
No, it's not so different, I hope. I think we are on the same line when it comes to the general objectives, and what we want to achieve is more on how and what are the tools available. Yes, thank you very much also from Copa Cogeca for giving us the opportunity to contribute to these important discussions. What I would like to stress first is that, yeah, we all depend on a competitive and sustainable agriculture in the EU, on the production of a safe, high quality and nutritious foods at a fair price. This is quite an important thing. I think it was also stressed by the previous speakers. And to achieve this, we need to ensure at the EU level that we have a coherent and stable framework, and we have also sufficient funding to support the agriculture sector, not only in producing the food that we need, but also in enhancing biodiversity, tackling climate change and rural development. As you know, yeah, agriculture has a lot of roles. In this context, yes, we agree with the general objectives of the two strategies proposed by the Commission on the biodiversity and the Farm to Fork, to have, let's say, to increase or to enhance our sustainability and resilience. But at the same time, we have to also stress that we are not so convinced about the targets approach. And in line with our discussion today, we can't accept, for example, the 20% reduction targets. It's a top-down approach, and it's promoting a one-fits-all approach also. And we consider that this is also in contradiction with good agriculture practices, because we still have a lot of areas in EU that are lacking of important nutrients. And in addition, the diversity and complexity of the agriculture sector needs to be taken into account. That's why we are more in favor of an approach that it's focusing on encouraging an efficient nutrient management. It was mentioned tools like precision and digital farming, advisory services, investments that we can discuss about it. I would like to close my statement saying also that, the transition, it's not starting today. We made a lot of efforts in Europe in the recent decades, and this needs to be acknowledged. And this was also stressed when it comes to the nutrient balance. If we look at the recent Commission reports, for example, on the case of phosphorus surplus, we could see a decrease of 50% in the period 2004-2015. So yes, I will really like to stress this point that we made already quite a lot of efforts. It's clear that there is still a lot that needs to be done, and we really need to find together with the Commission the right incentives to support the agri-food sector in continuing this transition towards a more sustainable agri-food system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jakob, you were instrumental in instigating today's event with Fertilizers Europe. Tell me why, and tell me your opening statement.
I'll be very happy to tell you why, Jennifer. I think the Farm to Fork strategy is an important document because we want here to have a robust and resilient food system in Europe that is here for the long term. And I was very happy to also see that nutrients and fertilizers was talked about in this context. And this is why I want to share a little bit more and make this debate so that we can discuss a bit what is in the Farm to Fork and how does it approach the nutrient question. Because the truth is, Jennifer, we cannot produce food without having nutrients. Nutrients is in everything we eat, and it's part of healthy food. So if we want this, we need to talk about nutrients. And just to make a sort of long story short, there are like basically two types of nutrients. There's the manure, the organic nutrients that comes from farmers, farm animals, and then there's the mineral fertilizers, which comes from the industry, which my industry produce, and the way they work on plants is the same way. So I think that's important to underline. And what I'm happy about in the Farm to Fork strategy is we had long discussions with the Commission, but in the end, the Commission said, let's focus on the problem. The problem is the losses. It's the losses of applying the nutrients or the fertilizers. It is not the use of fertilizers in itself. It's not manure in itself. And I think this is a very good starting point for the discussion we need to have. The other thing I want to highlight is, for me, agronomy is back. And it's been a long time where agronomy, I feel, has not been as respected as it should be. But now we need to talk about how can we improve our farming? How can we improve our practices? How can we make sure that farmers, they do better practices? How can we improve the yields without using more fertilizers? And I agree with the representative from COPA here that farmers have made many steps in this direction, but we need to go further. And I think also we need to make better use of the tools we have. Some of the tools have to come from the industry. We have to develop better fertilizers or new type of fertilizers which are easier to use and more focused on specific crops. That's one element. The other element was also mentioned here, that precision farming, using satellites, image of fields to make sure that we only fertilize areas that really need to be fertilized is the second element. But I think a key is also to help and support the farmers with decision tools to make it easier for anyone who's responsible for field to make better decisions when it comes to nutrients. So for me, a key aspect here is communication. We need to talk more about that. which is also why I'm happy it's in the Farm to Fork strategy, because we will achieve no change unless the farmer does it in his practice on his field. So we need to communicate. And I think this is where it's been mentioned also, but we need to talk about how can we supply knowledge, how can we support farmers in doing better, how can we create incentives so that we use our nutrients better, because we need to use nutrients, but we need to avoid losses. So this is my opening statement.
Thank you, Jakob. Let me pick up there on one of the things you said about nutrient losses and the reduction of nutrient losses. Pierre, there's a target that's EU-wide, and I know this is one of the issues for the Commission, that you can set EU targets, but the situation in member states is very different. So how can these nutrient losses be guaranteed at the same level across the member states, or does it need to be tweaked in different regions? I think that ties in a little bit to a question we have already from our Q&A from Kevin Growels, who is asking about taking into account losses throughout the entire supply chain. So if you could possibly address the different varying losses that we see in different places.
Well, thank you very much. It's a very sensitive question indeed, because I think the level of the target in order to ensure what we call zero pollution from nutrients is very high at -50%, but it is clear that not all member states, not all regions start, I think, from the same level. So what is important for us is that in order to achieve this target of -50% at aggregated level, at EU level, we need, I think, to enter into a discussion, into what we call a structured dialogue, I think, with the member states, in order to assess what makes sense in each of the member states. And this is why, before the formal submission by the member states of a strategic plan, in a phase that we call, I think, a phase of a structured dialogue, the Commission is going to ask member states to set at national level an explicit value for the reduction of nutrient losses, but take into account the specific situation of that member states. And when I talk about the specific situation of member states, we will ask them, I think, to show us, I think, where they are, what have been the efforts done, I think, so far. And I have to say, I would like to rebound, I think, on the what the representative of Copa-Cogeca mentioned. We have the most efficient agricultural system in the world. If we look at what has happened over the last 30 years in terms of greenhouse gas emission, in terms of use of production factors, in terms of use of inputs, I think we have a very efficient system, but I think, we need to do more and much more. And this is why we will look at what has been done in each country, what is the starting point, what is the potential, I think, for improvement, and we will ensure that, I think, the figures which has set the target, which has set a national value in aggregate, basically match and is coherent, I think, with this -50% that we want to achieve, I think, for the whole EU. And during, I think, the implementation of the strategic plan, in order to achieve this national target, we will ensure that, I think, there's full coherence, and I think there's no potential backsliding, I think, at national level. So it is clear that it will not be -50% applied across the board. It will be -50. It will be, a target set to achieve this -50% at national level, at EU level, taking into account, I think, the starting point. And one element that I would like to add also is that our main target is a reduction in nutrient losses. And this target, if we achieve, and we intend to achieve that by 2030, this -50% will translate into a reduction of -20% in fertilizer use. But again, this -20% will not be, applied across the board. It will be the result at national level. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine, I'd like you to come in on that. And we also have a specific question for you that you mentioned conventional and organic farmers as beneficiaries. Could you address perhaps what the differences are and what benefits can be had specifically in the area of nutrients between these two different sectors?
At first, I want to recognize on Pierre. I think we need a structured dialogue with the member states, and it's very necessary because the situation in every member state is different, and therefore we believe that targets are the right way. It's better to set targets. We believe targets are very good, but we need a corridor, not to set only the targets. We think we better achieve the targets when we set corridors. But you have the question about organic and normal farming. I think it's not good when we divide each ways. Every way has its place, and every farmer should decide which way he wants to produce his food. So the first priority for me is that we produced enough nutrition, very sustainable nutrition, and we can produce sustainable food in organic farming and in normal farming. And I don't want to divide both farmings. I think that's not the right way if we do this.
Oh, Anna, let me turn to you. We're seeing some questions coming in about what should be the baseline if we're talking about reductions. Where should we be setting that in order to move forward? That's a question that's come in from Eric van der Sommen. I'll leave it open to the other panelists as well to see if they want to answer that.
Yes, this is what I have mentioned before. I mean, we can see that the situation differs a lot between member states, and this needs to be acknowledged. We need to address the needs and also the let's say the challenges that some of the member states are facing when it comes also to. I mean, we know that it's much more complex. It's not only about nutrients, it's also about soil, climate change, farming conditions. So all this needs to be taken into account. So again, I mean, establishing a baseline at EU level, I will find it very difficult due to this situation.
Okay, Jakob, I'm going to throw a question that we've just had come in. I mean, probably in reaction to your statement, there are more types of fertilizers than just manure and mineral products. Would you like to talk a little bit about that, just to broaden out the whole space that we're talking about?
Yes, that's very true, Jennifer. You can talk about other types of fertilizer. I think one thing I probably should mention is that in the future, there'll be a bigger role for recycled fertilizers, where we take out nutrients in different types of waste and then recycle it and put it back on the fields as nutrients. And I think it has a very important future. It brings me back a little bit to what I started with. Agronomy is back for me. So whatever we do with nutrients, whether we use manure, whether we use slurry, whether we use recycled fertilizers, we need to talk about what is in them, what kind of nutrients are in these products, and how do they fit with the plants that we are trying to feed them with, so that we continue to develop an efficient type of farming. I also want to underline, Jennifer, just to pick up on the first question to Basku, because I think it's very clear that Europe is at a very different positions across member states. And there are many new research and reports being done just showing how different Europe is in terms of nutrients and applications and how much is used. And the simple fact that the livestock in Europe is very unevenly distributed. So you have a concentration of livestock in Northwest Europe where you have more manure available for nutrients. In Southeast Europe, Eastern Europe, generally, you have a lot less. So there you need to apply mineral fertilizer because there's no alternatives. And I think this is something we need and have the courage to talk about. I probably want to, I think I'll stop here, but I think we need to have the courage to talk about really agronomy and growing our crops efficiently. And it will take different ways of doing it across Europe. And I also want to highlight here that we need to be able to say that in some areas we probably need to use more fertilizer because we are not producing what the climate, what the soil is actually saying we should be producing. So we're inefficient. So we need to balance it out and make sure we focus on the losses and not on the use of fertilizers as such.
Okay, with a question here specifically directed for the Commission, so Pierre, for you. Alaric Sandrop is saying that the focus should be more on organic fertilizers because that's where the leakage is. With good management and technology and the nutrient utilization from industrial fertilizers can reach almost 100%. And he is saying that we should make sure that the nitrate directive from 1991 is fully implemented in all member states. How useful is it to split them in this way and to look back at previous directives that may or may not have been successful?
Thank you very much. This is a very relevant question because I think it is important, in my view, to look at this in a broader perspective. The issue is, in my view, is not about mineral fertilizer, or is not about non-mineral organic fertilizer. It's not only about implementation of legislation or not. It's about I think looking at manners by which we are going to manage to reduce the excessive use of this fertilizer. And by I fully agree, I think, with Mr. Hansen, that in some part of Europe we don't use enough fertilizer, and we need to increase, I think, the use efficiency of these fertilizers. In other parts of Europe, we use too much. And you mentioned already, I think, some regions where there's a high concentration of animals. So this is this balance that I think that we need to achieve, and we will achieve it in very different way. I think in some parts of the EU, I think the remedy will be to implement and enforce in a better way existing environmental legislation, be it the Water Framework Directive, the Nitrate Directive, the Clean Air Directive. I think in other parts it will be through incentive to promote, I think the better management and basically I think the using in a much more efficient way these nutrient management plans. In other parts it will be through the development of precision farming, etc. So I think there are different ways, I think, to achieve that. So I think there's not, I think, one size fits all, I think, solution. And this is why we have set, I think, this target at EU level, but it will be in the context, I think, of the analysis and the strategy being developed by each country to see what makes sense really, at national or regional level to both achieve, I think, the zero pollution target, which is very important for us, for the environment, but also for human health, and also to achieve, I think, the optimal level of productivity, because we shouldn't forget that we need to continue, producing more. I think, we are more consumers. I think there's an increase in population. So we need to basically find, I think, we need to optimize, basically, I think, the use of nutrients. And it's not an issue of mineral or organic nutrients. It's, I think, the whole set of nutrients. And what Mr. Hansen has mentioned also is very important, is that there are things that we can do through legislation, through support and incentives through the CAP, but there's also a strong role, I think, for research, innovation, and the type of fertilizers. Some of them, are more efficient than others. Some of them, I think, also need specific techniques, I think, spreading, timing of assimilations, etc. So this is something which is rather technical, and there, the research and innovation part, I think, will have, I think, a very strong, role, I think, to play in order to help farmers and I think the EU as a whole, I think, to achieve, I think, this win-win solution, zero pollution on one side, and continuing to have, a system of primary sector production which is efficient, resource efficient, and competitive.
Thank you. I think we're going to come back to some of those questions on innovation. There's a few I'm seeing coming in our Q&A. Oana, I'm going to take an anonymous question, which is about yields and the assumption that yields can be kept at the current level with the nutrient reduction still going ahead. Can you talk a little bit about whether there's a trade-off, is there a trade-off, and how we should look at that?
Yes, this is an important. It's an important aspect because we need to look at the environment and the economic aspects at the same time. So we need to make sure that this will not have an impact on the productivity, on the yields, and also on the carbon sequestration. So for sure, we have a lot of tools in place that would help the farmers to let's say, produce the same or more with less. But now it's how we made this available for farmers. For example, for small, medium farms, how they can have access to such tools. And here also, I would like to stress the importance of the cooperation of producers, organizations, cooperatives. We know that, we still need to work on this, at least in the Eastern European country, but we have a lot of examples at EU level, at EU, on cooperatives who are working closely with farmers in helping them being more efficient, in helping them having access to new technologies, to innovation. And here, for sure, also the CAP will play an important role. We will have a new agriculture and innovation system, the ACIS, in place. We strongly believe that advisory services, knowledge exchange, sharing best practices also could play an important role in helping farmers enhancing their sustainability, and also finding, let's say, the best solutions adapted to their needs and to their local conditions. So yes, as I mentioned, a lot has been done, but there are quite a lot of new opportunities when it comes to innovation and technologies that could be used. And we need to see how the member states will offer this or will include this in the new strategic plans, when it comes also to investments measures, and how much fundings will be available, both from CAP, but also we need broadband. This is an important part that we need to stress. 50% of the EU rural areas, unfortunately, they don't have access to high-speed broadband. So even if we have big wishes on being or using new technologies, this is an issue that needs to be addressed by regional development funds. So that's why I said coherence and support from all relevant policies is crucial. The common agriculture policy will not be the only one helping farmers. We need much more support on this, also when it comes to rural development. Thank you.
Christine, one of our attendees, Irene Hauser, has raised the question of the EU soil strategy, wants a more, better, comprehensive EU soil strategy, and how to achieve the goals of food security and sustainability. Could you talk a little bit about that? I mean, we know that around about 50% of global food production is produced from mineral fertilizers. So how does that tie into your view of achieving these very important goals?
Thank you so much for the question. On the one side, I will resume that I don't understand the discussion between mineral and organic fertilizer, because the target we have to reach, that we only give the fertilizer that the plant needs and that the plant can absorb, and everything that is overdosed goes in the soil and in the groundwater. And we want to stop this. And then it's not the question, is this a mineral fertilizer or organic fertilizer? And if we want to achieve the goal to have very good, very sustainable food, it's the one side is the farming, and on the other side is the consumer. And the consumer decided with his decision what food he buys, what farming he provides. And I think that's a question I always recognize when I read the Farm to Fork strategy from the Commission. We can read a lot about farming and targets we want to achieve in farming, but there are not clear goals how to achieve that the consumer wants to buy sustainable foods. And is he able to pay the price for sustainable foods? Or who pays the price for the farmer to provide sustainable foods? And I think we need to find the right balance in this side. And we have to give answer to these questions, because when we go this way and we put on the one side targets the farmers have to reach, and only the big farmers can reach it. Maybe the smaller family-run farms stopped to produce food, and then we got food out of the EU, and we have we cannot we cannot decide how it's produced outside the EU, and that's the way we also have to depend when we make decisions for our farmers.
Okay, thank you. And I think you've also addressed there a couple of questions regarding what consumers will see on their supermarket shelves, whether it will be European food and how much it will cost. Jakob, I'd like you to address the same question of sustainable goals and the role of nutrient use efficiency within that.
Yes, I think it's a very good question, and bringing on the sustainable goals, because I think it's about us providing exactly the right amount of fertilizer to the plant. And then I agree with Mrs. Snyder, whether it's organic fertilizer or mineral fertilizer, it doesn't matter in that sense. So with the right amount of fertilizer, we can alleviate hunger, we can create, we can alleviate poverty on sort of on a global scale. Also here in Europe, we can give farmers an income, we can bring good foods into the supermarket shelves. If we apply too much, we create problems for water, we create problems for soil, we create problems for biodiversity. So it really is about this balance that we need to find, and we need to work at it. And I think we need to work at it on a very different level across Europe with very different tools. And this is where I come back to saying that agronomy for me is back. For many years, people thought farming was easy, but now when we really have to find a balance and find the balance between producing and protecting the environment, agronomy is back. And I agree that we need to, and this is what I was trying to say before as well, we need to communicate more, we need to talk a lot with the farmers because they are the ones actually doing it in their fields. This is where it comes from. So communication is key, and I agree also with Nyako from COPA, Oana, that farmers have been doing a lot, and that's also why the challenge is we need to do more. So how can we create the incentives to do that? The other role that was brought up is also innovation, because I think in the industry we have to take it upon ourselves and say, can we make better products? Can we make products that's easier to use? Can we make products that doesn't only help the big farmers, which has the newest equipment, but also the smaller farmers so they can continue to be efficient? For me, a lot of that is about decision-making tools. I think Mrs. Snyder talked about it. When should we apply the fertilizer? Under what circumstances? What type of fertilizers? I think we need to help with providing these tools to make it easier for the farmer. And this is where I would like to see the Commission, when they talk about the strategic plans, when they talk with member states, to say, put a lot of effort into saying we need to have the tools ready for the farmers.
Oana, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of questions in our Q&A about some of these specific tools to the farmers. Sonia Rodriguez asks about the use of nanotechnology and nano-enabled application of nutrients and micronutrients, and whether that could enable a more targeted and timed delivery to plants. We've got questions from Manfred Stern about increasing the nutrient efficiency in the existing agriculture, and how do you make these technologies that are already available to farmers in their daily work? Would you like to tackle a couple of those questions just on making things practically usable when we know the technologies exist in the abstract?
I will start from maybe a more theoretical but important point, which is the research and innovation and the current and the future research and innovation programs at EU level. What is important is to make sure that farmers are part of research and innovation. This is an issue that we are fighting with this in some good years. We saw some improvements under the Horizon 2020, but we really hope that Horizon Europe will make a difference on this. Because we have promoted, and DG Agri was also insisting on the multi-actor approach. If farmers are not part of the research and they are not actively involved in the projects, this will not work. We have, unfortunately, a lot of maybe results that are too far from the farmers and too far from the reality. So this is something that I would like to stress, and we really hope that the 10 billions promised for the agriculture sector under Horizon Europe will be there, because this is something that we need to continue to invest in research and innovation, and we need to provide the right tools. We have also some good small and medium scale projects. We have asked our members not only on the fertilizers but in general on an efficient use of resources, and we saw, for example, there is a project in Greece, Spain, and Portugal, which is called Life Gaia Sense, that is promoting innovative smart farming services. So it's helping a lot of farmers in these countries in finding the right solutions and in combining information and technologies to improve resource efficiency. We have, for example, also in Sweden, more than 60,000 farmers were working together with the farming associations on a project on nutrient in focus. I have mentioned the cooperatives. Yes, there are a lot of good examples already in place of different technologies and information that could be used, and we see the results. And I can tell you the results are, I mean, the figures are impressive. The reductions that are made are very important. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Christine, let me turn to you and get some, I know you have to leave us a little bit early, but if I could get your sort of thoughts in general about what the future approach should be and what the best ways to do it, if you can in some way try to sum up what you've heard from the other speakers and what in those messages have really resonated with you.
Sorry, the last question. I have technical problems. Can you repeat, please?
Certainly, I can hear you fine. I just want to get your sort of closing thoughts on what the other speakers have been saying resonates with you, and which way forward you think is best for the future in terms of taking all these ambitions that we have and then turning them into action.
Okay, thank you. I think we have to be open for different technologies. We have targets by the farming we want to reach, or the Commission gives targets the farmers have to reach, and they only can reach it with new technology. And at the moment, I see we focus a lot of organic farming. But on the other side, one part of the parliament of the member states are not so open for new technology. We discuss about precision farming. We need precision farming to reach the targets. But only with precision farming you can find out what the plants need, and that the plants who need something, that it's that's the target for precision farming. And on the other side, we have different technology about plants, and I don't see that the parliament, every part of the parliament is very open for this technology, but we need it to reach the target. And that's a thing we have to discuss in the next week and the next months. And the other thing, if the consumer is able to support the targets the Commission has set.
Thank you. We are actually, my next question was going to be specifically to you, Pierre, on those targets. Renier Gerritz has asked about whether you can mention something more about the reference year period for this 50% reduction in emissions in 2030, especially for countries that have already reduced their losses significantly in the past. I think that touches on a question you answered earlier, but give us a little bit more about the timeline, the framework, and why the targets are set where they're set.
Thank you very much. Well, I think when we talk about targets, automatically, I think we talk about indicators which are meant, I think, to be used, I think, to set this target and to monitor, I think, the achievement of the target. And the indicator that we intend to use is what we call the gross nutrient balance. that we intend, I think, to monitor. And this will be used to set, I think, the starting point. And most likely the starting point will be, I think, the reference year will be 2017, because basically this is the most recent year, for which I think we have, information across, I think, the whole EU. And we will monitor the development in this gross nutrient balance, at national and maybe possibly at regional level over the years until 2030. And we expect that in aggregate at EU level, basically there will be a reduction in the differences between, I think, this gross nutrient balance, which is made of, this is a difference between the nutrient inputs, what I think basically we put into the soil, fertilizer, mineral fertilizers, manure, etc., and what is taken out of the soil, I think the output, which is basically the production of crops, I think biomass, etc. And I think we will monitor this difference in order to reach at EU level, a reduction in this difference, in this excess of inputs by 50%. So, and this is an information which is collected by the statistical office. So this is an indicator which is robust and solid, and which has been existing already for, which have been existing for quite a while. What is important for us is that why did we set, I think, this target at minus 50%? As I said before, we need fertilizer. We need to bring nutrients in order to ensure, to meet, I think, the need, I think, of the plant, and in order to, I would say, I think, meet, I think, the objective of food security in the EU. But we know that in terms of efficiency, there are some losses when we bring, nutrients. I think there's some losses in the soil in terms of when it is spread, when it is assimilated by the plants, etc. And what we want is to reduce the losses to a level that it doesn't cause, I think, pollution. And on the basis of empirical study, but also theoretical study, and what we have seen, at the world level, I think the optimal efficiency in terms of use of these nutrients is around, I think, 75%. And where we stand currently in the EU is at around, 65%, 66% at EU level. Once again, some countries at a higher level, some of them at much lower level, so we need more fertilizer. And this is why I think, if we want to move from this 2/3 in terms of use efficiency to 75%, which is basically according to the technology available and, the pedoclimatic, conditions in the EU, I think, this increment, this additional, increase in efficiency would translate into a reduction of losses by 50%. But once again, and I would like to come back to, I think, the proposal from the Commission for the future CAP, it is important that this overall target set at EU level is basically implemented, and and farmers have the right tool in order to address the specific situation. And this is why for us what is absolutely fundamental is that the member states set up a strategy in order to achieve the reduction of these nutrient losses, very high in some part of the EU, which will be very low in some other part, which have already done, I think, a lot of effort. And for this, they will have access, I think, to, I would say, I think, quite a broad range, I think, of instruments. Some of them, mandatory, some others, more, but for which I think they will receive, incentives, etc. But again, I think the starting point, I think, will be extremely different. And Mr. Hansen, I think, has already alluded to that. I think in some parts of Europe, yes, I think we need to use more fertilizer because the use efficiency is too low. In some other part of Europe, we have a huge excess, I think, in terms of mineral and or organic, fertilizers, and we need to reduce much more than 50%. So the starting point, I think, is again, I think, very different, but need to be measured on the basis of this gross nutrient balance, which is available, I think, for all countries.
Thank you, Jakob. I think you want to react to that, and perhaps in terms of time frame as well.
Yes, I think I want to say to the Commission and Pierre Pascu, I think it's very important that they come out with a concept as how we can measure achievements. And I have to say, from my perspective, the Commission is very, very ambitious, setting a reduction target of 50%, because we are talking about real life. We are talking about farming, about biological systems. So I find it's very, very ambitious, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try to achieve it. It just means that it is ambitious. I think it's important that Mr. Bascu has presented this gross nutrient balance, because we need to know what we are talking about. You cannot change what you can't measure. So let's use that as a measuring tool for how do we then stack up in the future? How far can we go? And I think one of the points here I want to make is I think it's very important also that we can involve the farming community in this, because again, change happens on the ground. And I have a big believer in farmers wanting to do it better. So if they can see my neighbor, if you have this tool and you can apply it to farm or the region or the crop, and you can say, the farmer can see, my neighbor, he does so much better than I. What is he doing that I don't do? Then we start a positive circle, a positive improvement circle. And this is what I really would like to achieve. And this is why I want to come back to one comment I made earlier. For me, it's not just about new machinery, satellites, precision farming. It's also about giving farmers the practical tools that they can use. It can be a nutrient planning tools, it can be handheld tools, it can be many things, it can be a smartphone. I mean, there are many sort of smaller tools that can be used by farmers. And I love this about creating a system where people can measure each other and say, I can do better. If my neighbor can do this, I can as well. And this is the situation I'd like to get into, because we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. There's been a couple of very specific questions to you, Jakob. We'll see if at running short of time, whether we can pass them on to you later. But Oana, I'd like to bring you in there just to react to what you've heard there, both from Pierre and from Jakob.
Yes, thank you very much. I will maybe not. I mean, I think we start to have a common understanding, let's say, of what is needed, and maybe what needs to be improved at EU level. And yeah, I mean, farmers for sure, as Jakob mentioned, are interested not only to increase their efficiency, but also to see, because yeah, I mean, inputs in general, they play an important role in the costs of the farmers. So nobody wants to pay more than it's needed and to use more than it's needed. So we always say that this cost part, it's an important one, and this for sure it is linked also to the impact on environment and the yields. So yes, we think that it's important to have a clear picture on where we go, and we have clearly asked from our side an impact assessment on the impact of these targets, when we look also at the economic aspects, on the viability of the farming sector, and also on the environmental aspects. So all elements need to be addressed, but we need to have, and I think this is what the Commission promised, what we heard from Commissioner Kyriakides, that there will be for each proposal a specific impact assessment. So this is something that I think it was also stressed by the previous speakers, that yeah, we need to have a clear picture, what we measure, where we want to go, and also how do we want to achieve at EU, national, local level these targets. But for sure, farmers are key here, and without clear messages at EU and national level on where we want to go, I think this will be quite difficult. And also having the right tools, financial tools in place, it will be difficult to achieve it. I saw also, if you do not mind, I saw a question also on the links between farm to forks and biodiversity strategy. I think this is an important one. If we see that the targets are coherent, and I think here I don't remember exactly the name of the organization of the speaker, but I think it's a very important topic, a very important issue on the synergies and coherence between the different policies, because we will have major issues and discussions on the increasing strict protection and setting aside of land. We want to ensure food security, to keep jobs, to keep rural areas viable, but having less land, increasing the organic that needs more land, I think that there is still a lot to be discussed, and we really look forward for the discussion in the Council and in the European Parliament on this. We should not forget that the Commission for the moment put this proposal on the table, but there is still a lot that needs to be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and also responding to that question there from Igor Schmidt. Christine, let me turn to you then. Another question that has been asked by one of our attendees, Vasa Vanacker, says, to what extent and in what ways is the problem of earning a decent income throughout Europe laid at the very basis of high nutrient losses, and how will the farm to fork tackle that problem? I'm sure this is a question that is going to come, as Oana says, in the ongoing negotiations.
On the one hand, I want to pronounce what Ona said. We need for everything in the farm to fork strategy and the biodiversity impact assessment. And we also ask for the Commission, then only you can decide what really happens with the targets. I think we need comparable procedures to see how the data from the member states we get. If you don't have the same procedures, we get a real problem for our farmers in the member states. And I'm very afraid how they then can reach the target if we have different starts. I think we can solve the problems of climate change if a lot of farmers stop her work in the EU. We need our farmers to produce this sustainable foods, and that's all the things we have to decide in the future. We have to depend on this. If we set targets our farmer can't reach, we can't produce food in the EU. And we have to import the food from other states, and then we can decide how they produce your food. And that's the important thing for me in the discussion about the farm to fork strategy, and on the other side on the biodiversity strategy.
Thank you. Pierre, I want to take a question from Colleen Dimbour, who is discussing the use of practical digital tools to improve efficiency. And she's asking, how much should this be made mandatory to encourage farmers to use the most efficient tools at their disposal, and how would that be managed to ensure compliance?
Thank you very much. A very interesting and relevant question also on one issue on which I wanted to come back, because we mentioned the role of research and innovation and possibly, digital technology in order to help and support farmers to reach, I think, this target, when the target will be set at each level, at regional or national level, because this minus 50%, once again, and I want to insist on that, will have to be translated at national level. And for this, farmers will have to have, access, I think, to different types of policy instruments and tools, on the ground. And I would like to recall that in the context of the Commission proposal for the future CAP, the Commission has proposed to introduce on a mandatory basis a farm sustainability tool for the use of nutrient in order to ensure a wide adoption of nutrient management plans, by farmers in order for them to optimize, I think, the use of nutrients. And I hope that this will be supported, I think, by the stakeholders and by the farmers, because this will be, one element, one of the pillars in order to basically achieve this objective of zero pollution, and also to achieve the objective of, improving the efficiency, I think, of nutrients, I think, on the farm. And this is a digital tool. This farm sustainability tool is a digital tool, and we see it, as an entry point, I think, for farmers. not only to use this tool that can be accessible on the computer or on a tablet, etc. I think to better manage the nutrients, but also it should be a tool that can be used also to improve, I think, the management of the farm, improve, I think, the marketing of the product, etc. So this is a tool that can give access to all the potential of digitization. So this is one element. The other element, which is also very important, it was for the last few years. I think the Commission has supported quite heavily, I think, the use of space technology. Information coming from Galileo, information coming from Copernicus, not only, I think, to control farmers, but also to help them, better use the farm, better manage the farm, sorry. And this is also for us, this is very important because this is an entry point in order to develop, precision farming, in order to develop, better technologies, to innovative technologies, I think, that can reduce ammonia emissions, etc. So this is something which is extremely important, and this, I would say, I think the promotion of digitization at the farm level is seen for us as a key enabler, a key instrument that will allow farmers, I think, to really much better manage, I think, their farms, to be much more efficient in the use, I think, of the production factors of inputs. Because here we talk today about nutrients, we could have the same discussion about, plant protection products, etc. So this will be extremely important, and this is why we have, in the proposal for the future CAP, the Commission has put a special focus and emphasis on the promotion of digitization, but also in the context of the recovery and resilience funds, and I think the possibility to use the increased funds, I think, for the CAP and for the farm sector in the context of the new budgetary proposal of the Commission. There is an element linked, I think, to the promotion of digitization, because we see it as something extremely important. And I will finish by that. We shouldn't see, digitization and the use of new technologies something which is reserved, I think, for the big farms or the most advanced farms. This should be available, I think, to all farmers, I think, across the EU. And this is something which is extremely important. And this is why we insist on this farm sustainability tool that would be, according to our proposal, which have been put on the table, mandatory for all farmers receiving CAP payment in the future.
Thank you. I think, Jakob, I'll ask you briefly if you want to answer one of these last questions before we move on to closing statements. Fefa has asked, to what degree should we consider the current geographic distribution between crop and livestock farming? Briefly, if you have time.
Yes, thank you. I think this is a key question when we talk about farming in Europe in general, because once you start looking at maps, seeing where are the animals in Europe, you will find that they have become very concentrated. So the challenges for farmers across Europe is very different, and especially when it comes to how can we get hold of nutrients, what kind of nutrients can we use? So I think it's an important question, and I hope this will be part of the future discussion. If I can just make one comment as well, Jennifer, on the digitalization of farming, I think it's a good way forward. It's very exciting, because there are many tests that shows that if farmers use maps showing where in the field there's a lack of nutrients, and then do selective application of fertilizers, then not only do they get a better yield, but they use less fertilizer. So you come back to, this is a real incentive for the farmers economically also to do better. So it's not just about being a good person, it's also something that you can actually make money from. And I think in general, I am very excited about this. I think there's so much we can do. I think we need to play more focus, not just on the big fertilizers, which is nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium, but also on some micronutrients, because like we all knew as humans as well, we need to have a balanced diet, so does the plants. So we should remember not just to talk about the big things that we are worried about losses from, but also the other nutrients, and make sure that farmers and advisors, everyone takes that into account, so that we get the best possible crops with the least losses. Because if you don't sort of feed your plants well, you will have losses, and we want to avoid them. So this is important for me to underline as well.
Could I turn to you and just get your final thoughts on both the discussion and what you think will be the strategy, what you would like to be the strategy for the way forward?
Well, I think the discussion for me has been it has touched many issues, and I think it's been very fruitful. And I think, as Juana said a little while ago, maybe we're getting a bit closer to understanding each other. And I think the first step is actually understand what are we talking about. And I think Mr. Bascu from the Commission did it very well to say we want to reduce losses. And this is something that resonates with me because I would be happy to help reduce losses. And I think he also mentioned this, we need to work about with the gross nutrient balance, how much do we put into the field and how much do we take out? Because then we can all relate to what are we talking about. And the third element, which I have picked up on and which makes me excited as well, is there's so many tools, there's so many possibilities, there's so much that can be done. And I'm excited about this, so let's get it started. Let's move forward. So Pierre Bascu from the Commission talked about we need to achieve a 75% nitrogen use efficiency in 10 years. Well, let's start using the tools and let's get going and see how far we can get.
Thank you. I think we'll let Oana sort out her technical issues. And Pierre, let's have your final thoughts.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Yeah. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you, I think, for this virtual conference, and I think the possibility to have this discussion and this clarification, because this is extremely important. Maybe I think 2 words. The first one is that I would like once again, I think, to underline that for us, I think the Green Deal and this Farm to Fork strategy, this biodiversity strategy, represent a unique opportunity, I think, to modernize, I think, the farm sector, I think, to make it more competitive, to make it more resilient, and at the same time to reduce, I think, the pollution for the soil, I think, on the air, on the water, to reduce greenhouse gas emission, etc. So basically, I think moving from a system which is operating but at the expense, I think, of natural resources in some parts of the EU and in some parts, I think, of the agricultural sector, to a food system in the future that will become, I think, fully sustainable. And for this, they will require, once again, I think, a lot of effort from farmers, but also a lot of opportunity. And I would like to insist on that. It is clear that each situation, I think, is very different, but all farmers across the EU have to gain, I think, from this new orientation towards, fully towards, full sustainability, full resilience, and competitiveness. And I have to say that this will be done, I think, with European institutions. This will be done, I think, with farmers, because we can only do it, I think, with farmers, with public authorities in the member states, in the region, but also with all the stakeholders. And Mr. Hansen, I think, is representing one. There's also other stakeholders, I think, around the table, and I think it's all together that we will move into this direction. And I have to say, I think, I would have a wish. I think the EU is very famous now in the food world at global level for food which is produced, of quality, being nutrition, being safe. It will be, for us, it will be, a big success if we manage in 2030 to make, I think, the EU, I think, the global standard for sustainability. So that we will be safe, sustainable, nutritious, and I would say plentiful, and this is what we want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think anyone could disagree with that. Oana, finally, your closing thoughts and comments, just briefly.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, there are so many things that could be mentioned. Yeah, I will just react quickly on the FAST tool that was mentioned by Mr. Bascu. I think we need to do it step by step, and really a mandatory tool will be quite difficult. As I mentioned, only 50% of rural areas have access to high-speed broadband, so we are not there yet, I think, to come with mandatory tools, but we fully support the initiative from the Commission. Communication is key. I think this was mentioned during the event, and what we have to maybe communicate more is with consumers and citizens. And they have also to communicate with us and better understand how difficult it is to farm. Farming is not a hobby. Farming is a way of living. And I think this is something that we all have an important role to play to better understand the farming sector, the needs, the challenges. There are plenty of opportunities, and the whole value chain and the consumers needs also to support farmers in implementing these new opportunities. And the bottom-up approach, it's what we are really insisting on. Create the right incentives, creating synergies and coherence between the different policies. And then we are very ambitious, and we fully support, and we will continue to support this ambitious at EU level, but we also have to pay attention to the imports. We need to make sure that there is a fair competition with the products that are coming from outside. We are investing a lot. We put a lot of effort in increasing our sustainability. We need to respect the same standards. So this is something that I would like to stress. And then we hope also that the Commission will come one day also with a target on the income for farmers. We are only at 46% at the moment. And also maybe a specific target to have even more young farmers and attract more people in rural areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As you say, there's a whole lot of different areas we could have been talking about today. We've tried to focus on nutrients, but as we said, time is short, and there were so many questions that came in from attendees on bio-waste, on agroecology, on recycled products, heavy metals and manures, micronutrients, and so on. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get to all of them, but I do encourage you to continue the conversation online or on Twitter. You can find out details about the participants' handles online or on the event page. And we would like to thank Fertilizers Europe for supporting today's video conference, and of course to thank all the panelists, including Christine Schneider, who, as I mentioned, had to leave us a little bit early. Do follow the hashtag EA Debates for more debates from Euractiv on this and other policy topics in the coming weeks. I think the recent pandemic has changed how we all work. It has made it even more important to focus on a resilient farming and food industry in Europe. And it's also made us much more innovative in how we're presenting conferences to you as well. So take note of that. Thank you all.